He was the voice of a generation, a symbol of peace and love. But on a cold December night in 1980, that voice was silenced forever. This is the story of John Lennon's final hours, and the chilling obsession that led to his murder right outside his own home. It's a story that's been told, but not like this. We're going to uncover the disturbing details of that fateful night, step by step. It was December 8, 1980. For John Lennon, the day started like any other. He and Yoko Ono were living in the iconic Dakota Building in New York City, a place they called home. That morning, they had a photo shoot with the legendary photographer Annie Leibovitz for Rolling Stone magazine. One of the photos from that session would become world famous. A tender image of a naked John curled around a fully clothed Yoko. It was a beautiful, intimate portrait that captured their deep connection. John loved it. He reportedly told Leibovitz, "You've captured our relationship exactly." Later that day, John gave his last ever interview. He spoke with a San Francisco radio DJ, Dave Sholin. He was energetic, optimistic, and excited about his new album, Double Fantasy. He talked about his family, his music, and his plans for the future. He was looking forward to turning 40, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and creativity after a 5-year hiatus from the music industry to raise his son, Sean. Listening to the recording, you can hear the hope in his voice. There was no hint of the tragedy that was just hours away. As John and Yoko prepared to leave the Dakota for a recording session at the record plant studio, a small group of fans was gathered outside, as was often the case. Among them was a 25-year-old man from Hawaii named Mark David Chapman. He was holding a copy of John's new album, Double Fantasy. When John and Yoko walked out, Chapman quietly stepped forward and held out the album and a pen. John, always gracious with his fans, took the album and signed it. "Is this all you want?" he asked. Chapman just nodded. A fellow fan and amateur photographer named Paul Gorish captured this surreal moment on film. The rock star signing an autograph for the man who would later become his killer. It's an incredibly haunting image, frozen in time. John Lennon, smiling, completely unaware of the darkness lurking in the man standing right in front of him. Who was Mark David Chapman? He wasn't just some random person. He was a deeply troubled man who had once been a huge Beatles fan. He had idolized John Lennon. But, over time, that idolization twisted into a bitter obsession and resentment. Chapman felt that John was a hypocrite. He couldn't reconcile the man who sang Imagine No Possessions with the multi-millionaire rock star living in a luxury apartment building. This perceived hypocrisy consumed him. He also became fixated on the novel The Catcher in the Rye, identifying with its alienated protagonist, Holden Caulfield. In his warped mind, he believed that by killing John Lennon, he could somehow absorb his fame and become somebody. He was a nobody who wanted to be a somebody, and he chose a horrific path to achieve it. Chapman had actually traveled to New York twice with the intent to murder Lennon. The first time, in November, he changed his mind and went back to Hawaii. But the dark thoughts returned, stronger than before. He told his wife he was going back to New York to write a children's book, a lie, to cover his true, sinister intentions. He returned, armed with a .38 caliber handgun, and waited. For days, he staked out the Dakota, waiting for the right moment. The moment John signed his album could have been the one, but something stopped him. Instead, he just stood there as John and Yoko got into their limousine and drove away to the studio. For the next several hours, Chapman waited. He stood in the shadows of the Dakota's archway, clutching his copy of The Catcher in the Rye. He could have left. He could have changed his mind again. But he didn't. He was committed to his grim mission. Meanwhile, at the record plant, John and Yoko were hard at work. They were mixing a new track called Walking on Thin Ice, one of Yoko's songs. The session went well. John was reportedly in high spirits, feeling proud of the work they were doing. Around 10:30 p.m., they decided to call it a night. They could have gone out for dinner, but John wanted to go home to see their 5-year-old son, Sean, before he went to sleep. It was a simple, fatherly decision that tragically sealed his fate. Their limousine pulled up to the Dakota building at approximately 10:50 p.m. Yoko got out first and walked toward the entrance. John followed a few paces behind, carrying cassette tapes from the recording session. As he passed the archway, he made eye contact with the man who had been waiting there for hours. He likely recognized him as the fan from earlier in the day. From the shadows, a voice called out, "Mr. Lennon." John began to turn, and in that split second, Mark David Chapman raised his handgun and fired 5 hollow-point bullets. 4 of them struck John Lennon in the back and left shoulder. The force was devastating. John stumbled forward, managing to climb the few steps into the building's reception area before collapsing. He gasped, I'm shot," and fell to the floor, the tapes scattering around him. Chaos erupted. The Dakota's doorman, Jose Perdomo, shouted at Chapman, "Do you know what you've just done?" Chapman, eerily calm, replied, "Yes. I just shot John Lennon." He then dropped the gun, took off his coat, and calmly began reading The Catcher in the Rye under a nearby street lamp, as if nothing had happened. He didn't run, he didn't resist. He just waited for the police to arrive. It was the final, bizarre act in his twisted plan for infamy. Police arrived within minutes. Seeing the gravity of John's injuries, they knew they couldn't wait for an ambulance. Officers carried him to the back of their patrol car and rushed him to Roosevelt Hospital. On the way, an officer asked him if he was John Lennon. He managed to nod and utter "yeah" before losing consciousness. But it was too late. He had lost an enormous amount of blood. Despite the frantic efforts of the doctors at the hospital, there was nothing they could do. John Lennon was pronounced dead on arrival at 11:07 p.m. on December 8, 1980. He was 40 years old. The news spread like wildfire. At the hospital, a producer from ABC News overheard what had happened. Soon after, the legendary sportscaster Howard Cosell broke the news to a stunned nation during a live Monday Night Football broadcast. He said, "An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News in New York City. John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous, perhaps, of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back, rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival." All across the world, people stopped what they were doing, in disbelief and heartbreak. The man who had sung "All You Need Is Love" was gone, taken by an act of senseless violence. In the days that followed, a wave of grief swept the globe. Fans gathered outside the Dakota, holding vigils, singing his songs, and leaving flowers and candles. The impromptu memorial became a symbol of the collective mourning for a lost icon. Radio stations played his music non-stop. His death marked the end of an era, a violent end to the dreams of peace and love that he had so powerfully championed. Mark David Chapman pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He has been denied parole multiple times and remains incarcerated to this day. He has expressed remorse, but his reasons for the murder remain a chilling testament to the dangers of celebrity obsession and mental illness. He stole a husband, a father, and a global icon from the world, all for a twisted desire for notoriety. The story of John Lennon's murder is not just about the loss of a musical genius, it's a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the dark side of fame. He was a man who preached peace, but met a violent end. His legacy, however, endures. His music continues to inspire millions, and his message of peace, love, and imagination is as relevant today as it ever was. His life was a testament to the power of art to change the world, and his death was a tragedy that the world will never forget. Imagine this. You've built a billion-dollar fashion empire from the ground up. You're a global icon, adored by millions, living a life of unimaginable luxury in a Miami Beach mansion. Then one sunny morning, it all ends on your own doorstep. This isn't a movie plot. It's the shocking true story of Gianni Versace. On the morning of July 15, 1997, Gianni Versace, the king of high fashion, stepped out to buy a magazine from a local cafe. It was a simple, everyday routine. He walked back to his magnificent home, the Villa Casa Casuarina, put the key in the lock, and in that instant, 2 gunshots shattered the morning calm. Versace fell, fatally wounded, on the very steps of the paradise he had created. The world was stunned. Why would anyone want to kill Gianni Versace? The initial chaos was immense. Was it a mafia hit? A business deal gone wrong? A crime of passion? The truth, however, would turn out to be far more bizarre and terrifying. The killer wasn't some shadowy figure from the criminal underworld. He was a 27-year-old man named Andrew. And what's chilling is that Versace wasn't his first victim. Not by a long shot. Before that fateful morning in Miami, Cunanan had already been on a 3-month cross-country killing spree, leaving a trail of 4 other dead men in his wake. He was already one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. The manhunt for Versace's killer became one of the most intense in modern American history. So who was Andrew Cunanan? On the surface, he was brilliant, charming, and handsome. He moved in wealthy circles, telling elaborate lies about his background, claiming to be a film producer or an heir to a fortune. He craved the high life, the world of luxury and glamour that people like Versace inhabited. But beneath this polished exterior was a dark, narcissistic personality with a terrifying capacity for violence. He was a pathological liar and a master manipulator, living in a fantasy world where he was the star. When reality didn't match his delusions, he would lash out with deadly rage. His spree began in Minneapolis in late April 1997. His first victim was Jeffrey Trail, a former friend and naval officer. He bludgeoned him to death with a hammer. Just days later, he murdered David Madsen, an architect and former lover, shooting him and leaving his body near a lake. From there, Cunanan drove to Chicago. His third victim was Lee Miglin, a 72-year-old real estate tycoon. The crime was brutal and sadistic, leaving investigators horrified. Cunanan then stole Miglin's car and headed east. His fourth victim was William Reese, a cemetery caretaker in New Jersey, killed simply for his red pickup truck. This truck would be his getaway vehicle to his final destination, Miami Beach. For 2 months, Cunanan lived in Miami, hiding in plain sight. He used his real name to pawn a stolen gold coin, a risky move that nearly led to his capture. He was staying in a cheap hotel just a few miles from Versace's mansion. He was a ghost, a predator stalking his prey. But why Versace? This is the question that haunts the case to this day. The FBI and police could never definitively prove a prior connection between the 2 men. Some theories suggest they may have met briefly years earlier in San Francisco. Cunanan was known to brag about knowing the famous designer, but with his history of lies, it's impossible to know for sure. Was it a twisted obsession? Did Cunanan see Versace as the ultimate symbol of the life he desperately wanted, but could never truly have? By killing Versace, was he trying to destroy the very world that he felt had rejected him? Or was it simply a final, desperate act for fame? Cunanan knew that killing someone of Versace's stature would make him infamous, etching his name into history forever. He would no longer be a nobody. He would be the man who killed a legend. It was the ultimate act of a narcissist craving attention, even if it was for the most horrific reason imaginable. After the murder, Miami was on lockdown. A massive manhunt was underway. The red pickup truck Cunanan had stolen was found in a nearby parking garage, filled with his belongings and evidence linking him to the previous murders. His identity was confirmed. The whole world now knew the face of Johnny Versace's killer, but Cunanan had vanished. For 8 days, he managed to evade the largest police dragnet in the state's history. The city was gripped by fear. Where was he? The end came unexpectedly. A caretaker on a houseboat, just 2 miles from the Versace mansion, noticed that someone had been living there. He called the police. When they arrived and stormed the boat, they found Andrew Cunanan. He had taken his own life with the same gun he had used to murder Gianni Versace and 2 of his other victims. He died without ever explaining his motives, taking his secrets with him. He left behind a legacy of terror and a string of unanswered questions. The death of Johnny Versace was more than just the murder of a celebrity. It was the tragic end of a creative genius who had revolutionized the fashion world. He brought rock and roll energy, glamour, and unapologetic boldness to the runway. He celebrated the human body and empowered women with his designs. His loss was felt not just in the world of fashion, but across the culture. It was a brutal reminder that even in a world of beauty and success, darkness can intrude in the most sudden and senseless way. Andrew Cunanan's story serves as a chilling case study in the dangers of unchecked narcissism and delusion. He was a man who believed his own lies, and when the world didn't conform to his fantasies, he chose to destroy it rather than face his own failures. The spree was not a series of random acts, but the desperate, final implosion of a man who could no longer maintain the fiction of his life. Decades later, the case continues to fascinate and horrify. It's a story about fame, obsession, and the dark side of the American dream. Gianni Versace's legacy lives on through the iconic brand he built, a testament to his incredible vision, but the tragic way he was taken from the world serves as a somber footnote to his brilliant life. A story of a star extinguished too soon by a killer who craved the spotlight. Imagine a superstar adored by millions, whose voice defined a generation. Now, imagine her life being cut short, not by a stranger in the dark, but by the very person she trusted most. This isn't a movie plot. It's the heartbreaking, true story of Selena Quintanilla. On March 31, 1995, the world stood still. Selena, the queen of Tejano music, was just 23 years old. On the verge of a massive English-language crossover that would have made her a global icon. She had it all: a loving family, a devoted husband, and a career that was skyrocketing. But behind the dazzling smile and stage costumes, a dark betrayal was unfolding. The person at the center of this tragedy was Yolanda. On the surface, Yolanda was Selena's biggest fan. She founded and ran Selena's fan club, and her devotion seemed boundless. Selena, known for her kind and trusting nature, saw a loyal friend and confidant. She brought Yolanda deeper into her inner circle, eventually making her the manager of her new clothing boutiques. It seemed like a dream come true for a superfan. But this dream was about to turn into a nightmare. Soon, red flags started popping up. Selena's father, Abraham Quintanilla, a shrewd businessman who had managed his daughter's career from the beginning, was the first to notice that something was wrong. He started hearing complaints from fan club members who had paid their dues but never received any merchandise. He also noticed financial discrepancies at the boutiques. Money was missing, and the numbers just didn't add up. When Abraham confronted Yolanda, she had an excuse for everything. But he was persistent. His investigation uncovered a web of deceit. He found forged checks and discovered that Yolanda had been embezzling thousands of dollars from both the fan club and the boutiques. She wasn't a devoted fan. She was a thief, preying on Selina's trust and success. When Abraham presented the evidence to Selina, she was devastated. It was hard for her to believe that her friend, someone she had welcomed into her family, could betray her like this. But the proof was undeniable. With a heavy heart, Selina knew she had to cut ties with Yolanda. On March 9, 1995, the Quintanilla family confronted Yolanda and fired her. They demanded she return all financial records and documents related to the businesses. This is where the story takes a sinister turn. Yolanda, cornered and exposed, didn't just walk away. Instead, she bought a .38 caliber revolver. She claimed it was for protection, but her later actions would tell a different story. For weeks, she delayed handing over the missing documents, creating a series of excuses to lure Selina into a meeting. She claimed some of the records were in Mexico and needed time to retrieve them. She even checked into a days-in motel in Corpus Christi, Texas, telling Selina she had been assaulted in Mexico to gain her sympathy. Selina, with her immense compassion, fell for the story. On the morning of March 31st, she agreed to meet Yolanda at the motel to finally collect the remaining paperwork and take her to a hospital. She went alone, a decision that would prove fatal. Inside room 158 of the Days Inn, the final confrontation took place. Selina demanded the documents. Yolanda, realizing her schemes were over, became desperate. The argument escalated. As Selina turned to leave the room, Yolanda pulled out the gun she had purchased weeks earlier. She fired a single shot, hitting Selina in the back, severing a major artery. Critically wounded and bleeding profusely, Selina's survival instinct kicked in. She managed to stumble out of the room, leaving a trail of blood nearly 400 feet long. She reached the motel lobby, her last ounce of strength spent. Before she collapsed, she used her final breath to identify her killer. Her last word was Yolanda. As paramedics rushed to save Selina's life, a tense standoff began back at the motel. Yolanda locked herself in her pickup truck in the parking lot, holding the gun to her own head. For over 9 hours, she engaged in a dramatic negotiation with police. All while the world's media broadcasted the scene live. She cried, she wailed, and she proclaimed her love for Selina, insisting the shooting was an accident. But the evidence was already painting a very different picture. Selina was pronounced dead at the hospital shortly after her arrival. The news sent shockwaves across the world. Fans were inconsolable. Vigils were held, and radio stations played her music non-stop. The vibrant, talented young woman who sang of love and dreams was gone, stolen by an act of senseless violence. Yolanda Saldivar eventually surrendered to the police. Her trial became a media sensation. Her defense team argued that the gun went off accidentally, that she had intended to harm herself, not Selina. But the prosecution presented a compelling case. They highlighted the embezzlement, the purchase of the gun, and Yolanda's manipulative behavior. And most damningly, there was Selina's dying declaration, naming Yolanda as her attacker. The jury didn't buy the accident defense. In October 1995, Yolanda Saldivar was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. She remains incarcerated today, a constant reminder of the day the music died. Selina's death was a profound loss, not just for the Latin music community, but for the entire world. She was a trailblazer, a cultural icon who broke down barriers and proved that a young Latina from Texas could conquer the world. Her legacy, however, is not just one of tragedy. It's a legacy of joy, passion, and incredible talent. Her music continues to inspire and move people, and her story serves as a cautionary tale about the dark side of fame and the danger of misplaced trust. Even decades later, Selena's star shines as brightly as ever. She remains a beloved figure, remembered for her incredible voice, her infectious personality, and the immense love she had for her fans. The tragedy of her passing will never diminish the light she brought into the world. Her name was Sharon Tate, a rising star, the wife of a famous director, and just 2 weeks away from becoming a mother. On the night of August 8, 1969, she was at her home on 10050 Cielo Drive in Los Angeles, surrounded by friends. What started as a quiet evening in the Hollywood Hills would soon descend into one of the most infamous and brutal crimes in American history. This wasn't a movie plot. This was real life, a true story of terror that shattered Hollywood's golden dream and exposed a dark, twisted underbelly that no one saw coming. Let's rewind to that summer night. The air was warm, filled with the scent of jasmine. Inside the secluded Benedict Canyon estate, Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, was enjoying the company of her friends. Celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, aspiring writer Wojciech Frykowski, and his girlfriend, coffee heiress Abigail Folger. Sharon's husband, director Roman Polanski, was in Europe finishing a film. He was due back just before the baby's birth. The mood was relaxed, a typical evening for a group of successful, beautiful people living the California dream. They had dinner at El Coyote, a popular Mexican restaurant, and returned home around 10:30 p.m. Meanwhile, miles away, a different kind of plan was taking shape. Charles Manson, a charismatic and manipulative cult leader, had gathered his followers at Spahn Ranch, a dusty, dilapidated movie set on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Manson, a failed musician with a long criminal record, had built a family of mostly young, impressionable runaways. He filled their heads with bizarre prophecies of an apocalyptic race war he called helter-skelter, a term he twisted from a Beatles song. He believed that by committing a series of shocking, gruesome murders and blaming them on black revolutionaries, he could ignite this war and emerge as the leader of the New World Order. That night, he gave his orders. He told 4 of his most loyal followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to go to that house where Melcher used to live and to totally destroy everyone in it. As gruesome as you can, the house he was referring to was 10,050 Cielo Drive, the former home of music producer Terry Melcher, who had once snubbed Manson's musical ambitions. Around midnight, Watson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Kasabian arrived at the gates of the estate. Their first victim was Stephen Parent, an 18-year-old who was just leaving after visiting the property's caretaker. Watson confronted him in his car and, without a word, shot him 4 times. The group then cut the phone lines and crept onto the property. Kasabian was instructed to stand guard at the gate while the other 3 entered the house. Inside, the nightmare began. Tex Watson woke Frykowski, who was sleeping on the living room couch, kicking him in the head and announcing, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." The terrified residents were herded into the living room. Chaos erupted as they fought for their lives. Frykowski managed to break free and ran outside. But Watson caught up with him on the front lawn, stabbing him repeatedly and shooting him. Abigail Folger also escaped, running toward the pool area. But she was pursued and stabbed 28 times by Patricia Krenwinkel. Back inside the house, Jay Sebring was shot and stabbed as he tried to defend the heavily pregnant Sharon. And then they turned on Sharon Tate. She pleaded for the life of her unborn child, offering herself as a hostage if they would just let her live long enough to give birth. Her pleas were ignored. According to the later testimony of the killers, her last moments were filled with terror as she was brutally stabbed 16 times. One of the killers, Susan Atkins, would later infamously state she felt no remorse, saying, "Woman, I have no mercy for you." Before leaving, Atkins took a towel soaked in Sharon S. blood and wrote the word pig on the front door, a grotesque calling card meant to further their helter-skelter prophecy. The next morning, the horrific scene was discovered by Sharon's housekeeper. The news sent a shockwave of fear and paranoia through Los Angeles and the entire country. The sheer brutality and randomness of the crime were incomprehensible. Hollywood, once a symbol of glamour and fantasy, was suddenly gripped by terror. Stars hired bodyguards, installed elaborate security systems, and questioned who they could trust. The era of peace and love, the carefree spirit of the 60s, seemed to die on that night. The question on everyone's mind was, who could have done this, and why? For months, the Los Angeles Police Department was baffled. The investigation was fraught with false leads and public pressure. The initial theories ranged from a drug deal gone wrong to a ritualistic killing, but nothing seemed to fit. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Months later, Susan Atkins, who was in jail for an unrelated car theft, began bragging to her cellmate about her involvement in the Tate murders. This confession was the key that unlocked the entire case. The police connected the dots between Atkins, the other killers, and their enigmatic leader, Charles Manson. The trial that followed was a media circus. Manson and his followers carved swastikas into their foreheads, sang songs, and showed no remorse for their actions. The world watched in morbid fascination as the twisted philosophy of the Manson family was laid bare. The prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi, masterfully wove together the evidence, painting a chilling picture of Manson's control and his apocalyptic vision. Linda Kasabian, who had stood guard but did not participate in the murders, became the prosecution's star witness. Her testimony was crucial in convicting Manson and his followers. In 1971, Charles Manson, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel were all found guilty and sentenced to death. Their sentences were later commuted to life in prison after California temporarily abolished the death penalty. The legacy of the Tate murders extends far beyond the gruesome details. It marked a cultural turning point, the moment the idealism of the 1960s crashed into a violent and senseless reality. Sharon Tate was not just a victim. She became a symbol of lost innocence, a talented actress with a promising future, a woman about to experience the joy of motherhood. Her life was cut short in the most horrific way imaginable. Her story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a charismatic facade and the devastating impact of blind devotion. It's a story that, even over 50 years later, continues to haunt and captivate us. A tragic final chapter to a decade of change, and a warning that evil can appear in the most unexpected of places. Can you believe that a single hug could cost someone their life? Today, I want to talk about a story that is both heartbreaking and a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the shadows of fame. This is the story of Christina Grimmie, a bright star whose light was tragically extinguished far too soon. Many of you probably remember her. Christina Grimmie was this incredibly talented singer who first captured our hearts on YouTube. She had this raw, powerful voice and a personality that just shone through the screen. She would sit at her piano, belting out covers of popular songs, and you could just feel her passion for music. It wasn't long before the world took notice. She wasn't just another cover artist. She was a phenomenon. Millions of people subscribed to her channel, eagerly awaiting each new video. Her fans, who she affectionately called Team Grimmy, were more than just followers. They were a community she built from the ground up with her talent and genuine kindness. Her big break came in 2014 when she competed on the 6th season of The Voice. From her blind audition, where she got all 4 chairs to turn, it was clear she was something special. Her coach, Adam Levine, was completely blown away by her talent. Week after week, she delivered powerhouse performances, tackling difficult songs and making them her own. She was fearless, and her vocal range was just insane. She ended up finishing in 3rd place, but in the hearts of many, she was the true winner. Coming off The Voice, her career was poised to explode. She had a record deal, she was touring, and she was releasing her own original music. The future looked incredibly bright for this young woman from New Jersey. But on June 10, 2016, that bright future came to a horrifying end. Christina was in Orlando, Florida, performing as the opening act for the band Before You Exit at the Plaza Live Theatre. It was a great show, and as always, Christina poured her heart and soul into her performance. After the concert, she did what she always loved to do. She went out to the merchandise table to meet her fans. This was a signature Christina move. She wasn't an untouchable celebrity. She was accessible. She was real. She loved her fans, and she cherished these moments where she could connect with them. Sign autographs, take pictures, and just talk. That night, as the meet and greet was winding down, a 27-year-old man named Kevin James Loibel approached her. He had traveled all the way from St. Petersburg, Florida, with a singular, sinister purpose. To everyone else in the room, he looked like just another fan waiting in line. Witnesses said he was quiet, just waiting his turn. When he finally reached the front of the line, Christina greeted him with her trademark warmth and open arms, ready for a hug. It was in that moment, as she moved to embrace him, that he pulled out a handgun and shot her. Chaos erupted. People screamed and scrambled for cover. Christina's brother, Marcus, who was standing nearby, acted with incredible bravery. Without a second's hesitation, he tackled the shooter to the ground. In the ensuing struggle, the gunman managed to break free, but instead of trying to escape or cause more harm, he took his own life with a final shot. Marcus's quick thinking undoubtedly saved other lives that night, but it was too late to save his sister. Christina was rushed to the Orlando Regional Medical Center in critical condition. For a few agonizing hours, fans and family held their breath, praying for a miracle. But the damage was too severe. Early the next morning, the devastating news was confirmed. Christina Grimmie had died from her injuries. She was only 22 years old. The news sent shockwaves through the music industry and around the world. How could this happen? How could someone so full of life and love be taken away so violently? As the investigation unfolded, a disturbing picture of her killer began to emerge. Kevin Loibel wasn't just a random fan. He was a man who had developed an unhealthy, obsessive infatuation with Christina. According to his former co-workers at Best Buy, Loibel's obsession was all-consuming. He would constantly watch her YouTube videos at work, talk about her non-stop, and even claimed she was his soulmate. He told them they were destined to be together. This obsession led him to undergo significant changes to try and win her affection. He got hair transplants, had laser eye surgery, and even adopted a vegan diet to lose weight. He was trying to transform himself into someone he thought Christina would find attractive. His co-workers would sometimes tease him about his crush, telling him that he had no chance with a famous singer, especially since she was known to be in a relationship with her producer. But Loibel wouldn't listen. He would become enraged at any suggestion that she was unavailable or that his dream was unrealistic. He believed they had a special connection, a delusion fed by the one-sided intimacy of social media. He followed her every move online, interpreting her general posts to her millions of fans as personal messages meant just for him. What's truly chilling is the premeditation. This wasn't a crime of passion in the heat of the moment. Loibel had planned this. He traveled to Orlando with 2 handguns, a hunting knife, and plenty of ammunition. He didn't have a ticket to the concert. He just showed up for the meet and greet, a part of the event that had minimal security. The venue had unarmed security guards who checked bags, but they didn't use metal detectors. Loibel was able to walk right in with his weapons concealed. His motive, as far as investigators could piece together, was a twisted form of love and jealousy. He couldn't have her, so he decided no one else could either. He went to that concert with the intent to confront her, and when his fantasy inevitably shattered upon meeting the real person, he resorted to the ultimate act of control and violence. The aftermath of Christina's death was a period of profound grief. Tributes poured in from everyone who knew her and everyone she had inspired. Adam Levine, her coach on The Voice, was heartbroken and even offered to pay for her funeral. Her fellow contestants, friends, and countless fans shared their memories of her kindness, her faith, and her incredible talent. Vigils were held across the country. The music world had lost one of its brightest young stars, and the world had lost a beautiful soul. But her murder also sparked a crucial conversation about security at concert venues, especially for smaller-scale events and meet and greets. For years, the focus had been on large arenas and stadiums. But what about the smaller clubs and theaters, where artists often have a more direct and personal interaction with their fans? Christina's death was a tragic wake-up call. Many artists and venues began to re-evaluate their security protocols. The hugline tradition, a beautiful gesture of connection, was now seen as a potential vulnerability. The industry had to confront the difficult reality that the very accessibility that fans crave can also put artists at risk. In the years since her death, Christina's family has worked tirelessly to keep her memory and her legacy alive. They established the Christina Grimmie Foundation, a charitable organization that provides support for families who have been affected by gun violence and for families facing a breast cancer diagnosis, a cause that was also close to Christina's heart. They have also posthumously released music that she was working on before she died, giving her fans one last gift and allowing her voice to continue to be heard. Her story serves as a tragic lesson about the dark side of fame and the dangers of obsessive fandom. In the age of social media, the lines between a public persona and a private individual can become dangerously blurred. Some fans can develop parasocial relationships, one-sided connections where they feel they know a celebrity intimately, even though the celebrity has no idea who they are. For most, this is harmless. But for a disturbed few, like Kevin Loibel, that fantasy can curdle into a dangerous obsession. When the celebrity doesn't reciprocate those feelings or live up to the fan's fantasy, the rejection can lead to anger and, in the most extreme cases, violence. Christina Grimmie's story is not just about a talented singer who was murdered. It's about a kind, generous young woman who loved her fans so much that she literally opened her arms to them. Her final act was one of love and connection, the very things that defined her life. It's a cruel irony that this act of kindness was met with such brutal violence. But her light hasn't been extinguished. It lives on in her music, in the memories of those who loved her, and in the work of her foundation. She will always be Team Grimmie's angel.